Hey guys, welcome back to the channel McNallie Money, home of all things stock, investment, and personal finance related. Now for today's video, we've got a very exciting one for you. We're going to be talking about First Tellurium Corporation. This is a company that we've covered on the channel previously, but today we've got the CEO here to tell us about his business and provide some updates since our initial coverage. Now before we get into it, please take a second, hit the like button, you guys. It's a big help to myself and the channel. If you're not already subscribed, McNallie Money, feel free to join. And let me know in the comments section below if you've heard of First Tellurium before, if you're currently holding shares, and what your outlook is on this market moving into 2024. Now with that being said, let's get into today's video. Okay guys, so that's right. Today's video, we've got the president and CEO from First Tellurium, Tyrone Docherty, on the channel. Now this is one that we've covered previously a few months back. There's been some big updates in the business, so we wanted to have Ty back onto the channel to provide an update on what the company's been up to over the last few quarters. So Ty, thanks so much for being with us here today.
Oh, it's a pleasure always talking about First Tellurium, Bryce. Thanks for having me.
Hey, now I know it's been a while since our initial coverage, so can you give us a quick intro on yourself and how you ended up at First Tellurium?
Okay, great question. Well, myself, basically, I had a previous company called Quinto Mining, which I took over in 1997. It had a market cap of $4 million, and I was fortunate enough to sell it 11 years later for $175 million. But instead of taking cash, we took paper in the company that acquired us. We're Consolidated Thompson Iron Mines. So we ended up being about 20 or 21% of them. And 2.5 years later, they sold for $4.9 billion. Yes, billion with a B. So our enterprise value was about $1 billion, give or take. So at that point, that was 2008. I was 48 years old, and I was basically semi-retired. Wasn't sure what I was going to do, but you know, mining is so darn tough. When my wife said, "What do you do?" I said, "Well, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm sure as heck it's not going to be mining." And here we are in 2023. I'm back in mining, and the reason for that is just after my semi-retirement there in 2008, a couple opportunities fell in my lap because, as you can imagine, Bryce, when you sell something, people phone you up saying, "Oh, here's a deal for you," and you know, and then I saw this property here, the Deerhorn, which we have in the First Tellurium, say, "Hey, this is something very, very special." So I thought, what the heck, you know, it sort of sells itself, and away we go. Now, I'll be honest, when I told my wife is, you know, I spent 11 years in Quinto. I don't think it's going to be 11 years, but here we are 15 years, so she always holds that over me. But other than that, it's a spectacular property, as we can discuss, and being at the right place at the right time. So that's what I've been doing, and I'm really excited. And I'm not sure if I mentioned earlier, but I only do run one company at a time. You know, some guys run 3 or 4, and they must be much smarter than me. It's tough to do it if you do it properly. So I'm quite happy. And I am the largest shareholder of the company. I never sell. If people look in the insider reports. So either I know something or I'm glutton for punishment. Either way, I'm the largest shareholder.
Hey, right on. There's a lot to love there. I'm looking forward to this discussion. You've got a ton of energy. You've got a ton of experience, obviously been around the block. And you must be doing something right with the wife to keep her around this long time. So that's good too. I know I'm always working to keep the wife happy as well. Now, for people who are unfamiliar with First Tellurium, I know you have the Deerhorn property. You've got some really unique assets, a really cool company. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the projects and some of the assets in the portfolio?
Yeah, well, we have 2 properties in our portfolio. The Deerhorn property in British Columbia, not too far from the Huckleberry Mine, about 35 kilometers as a crow flies, and that's where our exploration program is starting here. But we also picked up a world-class property down in Colorado that used to be owned by First Solar. And First Solar is the biggest user of tellurium when it comes to solar panels in the world. So they used to own it. They decided they didn't want to get into the mining business, and we managed to buy it off them through their head of exploration, who bought it from them and gave it to us. So we're a junior company. I think our market cap's around $9 or $10 million. We've got 2 world-class properties, which is quite interesting when, you know, most juniors are hoping to get one down the road, but we've got 2 we're sitting on. And that sort of gives us the confidence. And at times, you know, people might come across as myself being a little bit arrogant. But having sold the previous company, I know that when you're sitting on something special, you don't just give it away. You just don't take the first dollar that comes your way. And when I sold the last company, well, I guess what I should have said with Quinto Mining is that the negotiations lasted all of 10 minutes. Not 10 months, not 10 weeks, not 10 days, not 10 hours, 10 minutes. I was down at the Masters Golf Tournament in Augusta, Georgia, and they made an offer to me on the Saturday night. We shared a house down there for the tournament. I countered, and then they agreed. We shook hands, and that was it, because they needed the property, and it was great for my shareholders, obviously. And the best time, to sell something is when you don't have to. So that's sort of what I've said to shareholders all along. My personal opinion, and this is my personal opinion, not the corporate opinion, is I believe we're going to get bought out here in the next couple of years. The only question I have is, who's it going to be? Is it going to be a solar company that needs tellurium for solar panels, which we can get into later on? Is it going to be a battery company, automobile company, for this new lithium tellurium battery that University of British Columbia is pushing forward? Or is it going to be a copper company now that we have this copper porphyry we've discovered and said? So, and anyways, as I say, it's if you have multiple potential buyers for your property, it's better to have that. Like if you sell real estate, if you only have one person interested in buying your house, well, it's a tough negotiation. If you have multiple people, well, it makes it a little bit easier to get what you want. So when you're not forced to do anything, money's not a problem for us. We go forward, and it's a great situation to be in.
Yeah, it definitely is. It's a really interesting company, and you've alluded to a number of things that caught my attention when I did my initial coverage. So good segue, I guess, to the next question here, Ty. What is tellurium? I know you said it can be used in multiple different areas. And outside of tellurium, I know the company is focused on some other minerals or metals as well. Can you tell us a little bit about, first of all, what is tellurium, and then this multi-target approach?
Yeah, well, glad you asked that question, because tellurium is one of the most critical metals in the world. It's the 8th or 9th rarest metal in the world, on the same level as platinum. And it's used mainly in solar panels right now, cadmium tellurium solar panels. And the biggest user of that is the biggest one in the United States, First Solar. They use cadmium tellurium, where a lot of other solar companies use silica. So they need it, obviously. And then we have thermoelectric uses 30% of it. And now with this new battery from the University of British Columbia, Okanagan, which I know you're familiar with, they say it's far superior. Their lithium tellurium battery is far superior to a lithium ion battery. So when people get to learn about that, and when they get into small scale production, it'll certainly assign focus on ourselves. So it's great to have that commodity. But what makes it interesting, Bryce, is the fact that the world market for tellurium is only 600 tons a year. It's been basically steady for the last decade or so. And then about 18 months ago, the CEO of First Solar, in an interview with the S&P Global magazine, said that for First Solar's use themselves starting in 2024, they're going to need between 900 to 1,100 tons a year of tellurium. So let the audience think of that. If the world market is 600, and they're going to need between 900 to 1,100, that's going to be a big crunch to satisfy. And then when you throw in the fact that the Biden administration is starting to have trade discussions, if you will, fights with China. So China right now produces 60% of tellurium, as they do with most of the critical metals, but 60%. So if that gets taken out, you go from 600 tons down to 240. And then you've got First Solar just themselves needing between 900 to 1,100. So that's what I say to people, is that's why we called ourselves First Tellurium, because tellurium is not the most abundant mineral on our property, but it's the most important. As I tell people, is that, when it comes to gold and silver, we've got high-grade gold and silver, but we're not a monster property. It's not like we're going to have 5 or 10 million ounces of gold and 50 million ounces of silver. We're going to have a lot of silver, but not that much. But what separates is the fact that, as far as we know, we're the only junior in the world that has this tellurium, and we've got 2 phenomenal properties. So anyone that needs it in the future is going to come knocking on the door, because 90% of tellurium comes from copper refining. Okay, 10% comes from in situ minerals. So I'm not sure how the copper is going to keep going around the world. Most of the easy projects have been cherry picked, so I'm not sure what the supply is going to be. But even if it stays steady, the demand is certainly going to increase. So we're in a great situation, and that's why we named ourselves First Tellurium, so that anyone that's Googling that needs it says, oh my goodness, who's this company? And that's what sets us apart. And here's the interesting thing for your audience. If tellurium went to zero, it would have virtually no effect on us, because it represents right now 5 to 10% of our payload, if you will. But we're a high-grade silver property and high-grade gold. So that's going to be most of our paycheck, if you will. So if tellurium went to zero, which is not going to happen, it would have very little effect on us going forward. So it's a great position to be in, so that anyone that knocks on your door realizes that you got so many opportunities here that you're not focused on the one metal, which unfortunately some of these other companies with these other critical metals, whether it's graphite or lithium or cobalt, they got to hope that they've got rich enough minerals to be able to make a positive decision. Where in our case, it's like, okay, it's all gets lumped into one because our tellurium, fortunately, is wrapped up in our gold and silver. So it's not a separate deposit at all. So we're blessed in that situation. And then when we allude to the fact that all these other minerals on the property, it's just, most people, if they looked at our story and didn't know our share price or our market cap, and then they said, oh, they got a market cap of 9-10 million Canadian, they would shake their head and say, oh, no, it can't be true. They have all that going for them. They've got to be much higher. And so that also presents one of the hurdles, is that people tend not to believe you. So I just say, look, everything we say, we just say, don't believe a word I said. Believe this magazine, believe that report. And that way, because when you're sitting on something so good, you don't have to make anything up. So what has happened in the last 6 to 9 months, last September, October, well, I guess that's a year ago now, I guess get my calendar right. Our QP, our qualified person, Dr. Lee Grote, the world-renowned professor at University of British Columbia, walked the property, the Deerhorn property, with my chairman of the board, Tony Fogarossi, who is also a geological expert. Tony graduated gold medalist of UBC back when we were younger. Tony and I went to high school together. And then the driller that's going to be drilling our property this year, he walked it as well. So not only did they extend the known zone of our gold-silver tellurium, which was 2.4 kilometers, they extended it by almost 50%. They extended it by another 1.1 kilometers. So it's now 3.5 kilometers just on the gold-silver tellurium and still open. And then while they're there, they walked on the other side of the mountain there and confirmed that we are sitting on a copper porphyry, which, as you know, Bryce, every junior company in the world would love to have a copper porphyry. We just happen to have it. So what I like to say to the detractors, they're going to say, well, how come you just found it now? I said, well, it's basically, you can thank Mother Nature. Because we're up a mountain, it's historically been covered by ice and snow up until the last 20 years or so. And because of the global warming, the ice has melted, the snow has melted. So when prospector turned the corner, our geologist in 2012-13, and he saw this copper sticking out of the ground, he's like, oh my goodness, what do we have here? So it's since melted more. And they looked at it in September and October last year, and they're just blown away. So we've just finished a sampling program, rock sampling and soil sampling. And we announced about a week or so ago that instead of having two zones, a copper zone and a separate gold-silver tellurium zone, it looks like it's all one big zone that's at least, and I use the word at least, 5 kilometers. And there's still opportunities to expand that. So you imagine a junior company sitting on a body of, I'm not allowed to call it ore, mineralization that's at least 5 kilometers long. It tells you why we're so excited, and, so we just finished the work program, as I said, and we're ready to get up there in the next week or so and do a couple of holes, drilling holes into the copper, just to show the big boys that, in fact, we have something very, very exciting, to say the least. And to put a finer point on that, I mentioned that the driller was up there in October and September walking the property, and he was so blown away by the copper. Now, he's been drilling for close to 40 years. He was so blown away by the copper, he phoned his business associates in Alaska that he had been doing business with for 16 years and told them, hey, I've just seen one of the most wonderful properties I've ever seen. You should buy shares in this company. And he told me he's never in 16 years told them to buy a company, but he did with ours. And so, they made an offer to, if I wanted to do a financing. But as I said, my usual routine is I don't take money just from anyone, certainly not at big discounts if I don't need to. So fast forward to January, and they phoned me up and said they had a brand new drill, never used, that our driller built up in Alaska, sitting at the pebble that they don't need now. Would we like to buy it for them on a huge discount on one condition? They wanted shares and not cash. So I don't know what that says to everyone, but it kind of says to me, well, when people don't want cash but they want shares, it kind of tells you what they think and what they know. So we're fortunate to have all these different minerals on the property. And as I joke all along, I said, if I wasn't worried about getting sued by Disney or whoever the ride amusement company is, I would call ourselves Magic Mountain, because we have so many different minerals on there. We have a potentially world-class, I don't want to keep saying world-class, we have a very high-grade tungsten property. That was the original reason it was discovered in 1943. The Canadian government was looking for tungsten for World War II armaments. So in 1943, this property, the Deerhorn, was founded, and then 2 years later, the war ended, so there wasn't a need for tungsten. But while they're up there, they found the gold and the silver, and the rest is history. So we're blessed to have all these multi minerals on there. And the thing is, I don't want to be seen as someone that's standing on a street corner saying, who wants tungsten, who wants copper, who wants gold? But we have, to the east of our property, we have a very interesting target of molybdenite, moly, which is now coming into the view of investors over the last year or so, that was basically dead for 15 years. So we didn't talk about it. And it's not the focus of our exploration program, but our former qualified person who's now retired, Bob Lane, said if he was asked years ago if he had to describe the Deerhorn property, he would describe it as a moly property with all these other minerals to the west. So we haven't even touched the moly, but historically, the water samples and soil samples over there, I believe, was either the 5th or the 7th highest in the history of British Columbia for moly, and we haven't done anything about it. So it's just there's so many possibilities there, and that's why I sit there and say I know what we're sitting on, and I don't plan on putting it into production, but if we have to, we can do it on the small scale. But anyone that wants to perhaps buy us out, they're going to have competition. As I mentioned, is it for the tellurium? Is it for the copper? Is it for the tungsten? Who knows? Maybe now the moly. So it's a unique situation. I don't know of any other junior. I've been in these markets for 39 years. I was about to say 40 years, but that would be an exaggeration. 39 years. And I don't know of a junior company that has all of these opportunities available to them.
Yeah.
And we understand that.
I like the name Magic Mountain, and it does seem that the property, the story, it just keeps evolving and getting better and better. So love the context there, Ty, and the shout out to UBC Okanagan. I can tell you, I was definitely not inventing batteries while I was going to that school, but I did attend and I did graduate. Now, the next question was going to be what differentiates First Tellurium, and I think we've done a pretty good job explaining that, the management team, the experience, the properties themselves. But is there anything in addition to that, Ty, in your mind that really separates this company, market cap we talked about, from the rest?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things is our associations with, we were in groups that are called like IRMA, is an Initiative for Responsible Mining Association, which have some of the largest mining companies in the world that are members that have how to proceed properly and not damage your property and the environment and so on. But also its members are companies like BMW and Microsoft and all that. And we were the first, and I think we might still be the only, but I've heard there's rumblings there might be a couple of juniors. We're the first junior accepted into it because these people look to say, how do we do things as a company? Do we just go rip and tear the property apart, or do we manage it so that it has at least environmental impact as possible? And our relationship with First Nations, as we can get into, is phenomenal. And just that people appreciate how we do things. So we have great relationship with the First Nations. We're environmentally sound, and we just move things along and get the attention of groups like that.
Gotcha. Yeah, and that's the next question for you. I know in your investor presentation, you make note of some of these key partnerships or strategic partnerships that in my mind really are a good differentiator for you. So you mentioned some of them already, but tell us a bit more about these partnerships and why do they matter in the mining community?
Well, I'm not sure that they matter in the mining community per se, but they certainly matter as far as technology goes, right? Because we might be having some kind of marble or something, you're kind of limited to what you have, but because of the critical metals that we have, certain opportunities are opening up. So one of our most important partnerships is a company out of Trail, BC called Phoenix Advanced Material, and that's FENIX, and they are one of the top ultra high purity manufacturers of metal in the world. They do 7N technology, which for the audience is 99.999999% pure. And they've been doing that for years, and they sell various minerals to all over the world, especially the Department of Defense in the U.S. and so on. So They approached us about 5 years ago now, when they realized that we had this deposit of tellurium there in British Columbia, because they've been importing it from other areas, and they know that the tellurium market's going to grow, and if they can get their hooks into a local producer down the road, it would behoove them. So it's Phoenix Advanced Material. And by the way, their CEO, Don Freshy, is on my board of advisors. I like to surround myself with bright people, which I'll talk about in the future. Anyway, so his partnership with the University of British Columbia, Okanagan, that with this lithium tellurium battery. And what we should explain to the audience about, there's 5 basic advantages I've been told from UBC, their patent, as opposed to lithium-ion battery. And I think it's important to say that, if people don't believe that the lithium batteries are going to be important in the future, they should probably turn off this interview right now and go do something else. But for those that understand where the batteries are going, this is going to be an important part, because as important as lithium batteries are, and obviously they are, if you can have something that's far superior, it kind of puts you in the ballgame, so to speak. So the 5 advantages are, number 1, it's much more powerful. Number 2 is it easier to charge. Number 3, lasts twice as long. Number 4, size-wise, so I'll just put up my hand here. So if you can imagine a lithium-ion battery for your car being this big, okay, then a lithium tellurium battery, which I said, again, is more powerful. You can measure between your thumb and your forefinger. So what would that do for weight of an automobile or airlines or any other potential use? Obviously very important. And the 5th and final advantage, which probably is one of the most advantageous, is that it's a solid-state battery price, which means it cannot catch fire. Lithium-ion batteries can and do catch fire. As you know, recently that big freighter out of Holland, one of the electric vehicles caught fire, and 3,000 cars ended up at the bottom of the Atlantic. And that's not the first time it's happened. And the city of New York, back in March, did an ordinance to work on the lithium-ion batteries, because a delivery driver on his bicycle, his electric bike exploded and caused a 5-alarm fire. So when you have that going for you, I say to people, if that was the only difference of a lithium tellurium battery, I think it's kind of important as far as automobile companies goes and insurance company goes, but there's all these other benefits as well. So people are just finding out about that, and I believe the UBC is hoping to, UBC/Phoenix, hoping to have some type of small commercial product available in 2024 to show people what they're having. So again, what I think that would cause concern, if I were in the solar industry and I needed tellurium, and I find out, oh my goodness, there's this new battery that has tellurium, and someone else might want it, so it might force people to the table quicker than they want to. And I made reference to Don Freshy, the CEO of Phoenix Advances, being on my advisory board. And I would like to let people know that under the 4 other guys on my advisory board, 4 of them used to work for First Solar. So we got the solar side taken care of. They know all the contacts, they know whatever. So as I mentioned, I might be a C+ student, Bryce. So why do I want to surround myself with other C+ people? I got really bright people that give me, their answers, and I can handle the good or the bad. Just tell me what the situation is, and we go from there. So we got 4 guys that used to be with First Solar, including their top metallurgist, their land package, and knows all the other people around the world that have tellurium if we need to expand. And then we have Don Freshy with the battery side. And then my 2 other advisors are Dr. Lee Groth, professor at UBC, world renowned, who also contracts for the governments of Japan and India, so he's well known for a number of years. And then a Dr. Paul Spry, who's at the Iowa State University. He's an economic geologist, but Dr. Groth says that Dr. Spry is the preeminent expert in tellurium in the world. So we've surrounded ourselves with pretty good, because I don't really need experts on gold and silver. We sort of know what gold and silver does, but because it's a unique metal, it's nice to have all these experts sort of telling us where we're going and what's happening for us. So it's a great situation to be in.
Most definitely. I try and do the same thing, surround myself by the smarter people, and it seems to work out pretty good. Now, we've covered a lot already, and I know you've made reference a few times to some of the macro tailwinds we're seeing here. The Biden administration, the desire for both the Canadian and U.S. government to onshore a lot of the production and the sourcing of these minerals and metals. What are you feeling on the macro level? Because I know there's a lot of retail attention on this space, on these battery-focused companies, And I really feel at a macro level, we're starting to kind of hit that critical mass. Would you agree with that, Ty?
Yeah, I would agree as a matter of fact, but my only difference is when it comes to the EV market, I don't think we're going to have the infrastructure in place for 30 to 40 years for all these EV batteries. So it's going to present problems for, but again, when we know the solar panels are growing and it's going to keep growing and all that, so the demand for our cells and tellurium. And by the way, silver is also another big element that's used in solar panels, and we would probably consider ourselves a silver property first up in BC. So we got that going for it as well. So yeah, the infrastructure is going to be fine. And so in the meantime, it sort of leads to our other announcement that we made back in April, I believe, that we own 51% of a thermoelectric company. Because an inventor in Florida, an engineer, called me up in I think it was January, February, saying that he's working on an invention, a thermoelectric invention that he believes will have a huge benefit on the solar panel market, but also will have a huge benefit for the automobile industry, the efficiencies of engines and so on. Because I didn't know this, I probably should have known, but hence why I'm a C+ student. Is that the efficiency of an engine is only 16 to 18% efficient. So he believes that his invention will be much, much higher than 16 to 18%. I'm not going to say what he said it was, because, if he said 100%, which he didn't, but just as a joke, if he said 100%, you only got 98, so I'm saying, oh, you lied. You only got 98. So the point is, he believes it's much better than the 16 to 18%. So again, that'll be more competition. So if in fact we get into mining of the tellurium, do we ended up selling the tellurium to ourselves for the thermoelectric thing? So that's another competition that people in the batteries and in the solar panels have to worry about. Because you can imagine if we get a patent, which we're going to be filing for, if it can greatly enhance the proficiency of the internal combustion engine just for automobiles, I would imagine if the government say, well, okay, we're 30 or 40 years away from getting the EVs going across the country. Well, if there's an invention here that can make it efficient, much more efficient, then why don't we throw those into the internal combustion engines until all the rest is gone? So we're in a great position. And then it leads to the question, Bryce, why did he call us? Right? Why are all these people calling us? Right? And the answer is very simple, that most of his invention is constituted with tellurium. So he was looking around saying, who's got tellurium? Because he's had a couple other inventions before, very successful. And he looked and say, okay, well, if I got to deal with the source, who's got it? So he found us, again, Googling, found First Tellurium and followed us online, I guess, for about a year, my YouTubes and how we deal with people and so on, and felt comfortable to approach me. And that's what happened. So we did the deal. I think it was April, might have been March, but April, and he's working on the invention now. So by the end of September, early October, I'm told we will have a couple of prototypes, one for the solar industry, one for the automobile, and then we'll go from there. We'll be filing our patents, and I just tell my board of directors, if in fact we can have a huge benefit on the automobile industry or the solar, that could be more than all we have in our minerals. So if in fact we get bought out, Bryce, I keep on saying if, then my the thermoelectric company spun out into a different company for the invention and the patents and all that. So our shareholders can take benefit, because if a solar panels company wants to buy you out, or copper company, as much as they probably like to get hold of a patent, it's not going to keep them up at night. So it could be a real cash cow for us if in fact these all work out. So we're pretty excited, and that's one of the reasons by calling ourselves First Tellurium, it was easy for people to Google us to say, okay, you got it. How can we work together?
Yeah, exactly. It's in the name, right? So a lot of people, and I think it is interesting how all these people are channeling and funneling into you and your company. It definitely, in my mind, is kind of the writing on the wall. Now, I'm glad you brought up some of the recent news and developments there. Another piece of recent news I know that was just announced is this private placement. So can you give us a bit of context as to why you did that and what that enables the company to do?
Yeah, well, we intentionally kept it small. Like I see, I'm not really happy with where the share price is. I mean, personally, I think it should be higher, but I put a bunch of money into this private placement. So on one hand, I'm saying it should be higher. On the other hand, say, oh, thank goodness I'm not paying $1 a share for it, right? And the reason is we're going to do a couple of drill holes up at the property focused on the copper section just so that we can show people we have it more than just sitting on the surface. Because Dr. Groves said we are sitting on a copper porphyry, so the best thing to get the other big guys to jump into the room and show them you actually have something. So we'll put a couple of drill holes into it because our season ends the end of October. We have to be off the property before then, so we have limited time. So we just have enough. We're doing $600,000 in flow through, which I'm taking 20% minimum myself. I'm putting in 120,000. I'll probably add to that. And we're doing a small non-flow through of about $400,000, which will pay for our overhead and any of the patents we have to do for the thermoelectric, and we'll go from there. And then we're pretty confident that we get the drill results back from the copper and everything else. People sit and say, "Oh my goodness, they actually are sitting on something really good." And we think it'll take it from there. Getting ready for next year. As I mentioned, we got the drill. We paid with shares, and our plan is to have a second drill up there for next year when we do a much bigger drill program. We'll have 2 drills going to follow up on what we do this year, because not only did we get the sampling done, rock sampling, soil sampling just finished a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago. We've got a company coming out of Saskatoon to do an IP survey. So now we can actually look below the surface on what we're looking at, see how big, and those two combined with a couple of holes we drill here will be the formation of where we're going to drill next year, because we're going to have so many targets. We have to figure out, okay, where do we go? And at that point, again, my gut feeling is, if I were a copper company, and I don't even play one on television, but we put a couple of drill holes this year and say, oh, we hit, whatever it is. Do they wait and let me drill all of next year to prove up a heck of a lot more copper? Or they say, well, maybe we should get in there before we buy so much more competition. So we're in a great situation to be in. So it's like I said, that's why when I semi-retired, as a property, I just pulled me out and say, okay, we're really good. Again, I think it'd be 15 years, but the markets are kind of strange and whatever. So, but I'm the largest shareholder, as mentioned, just putting in another 20% and probably will top that up before the thing closes. So, no, I'm a believer.
Okay, great. Yeah, I appreciate the insight on that private placement, Ty. And I know earlier we talked about a few of the partnerships, but I know there's a couple other ones with some big names associated with them. So before we get into closing comments here, are you able to actually shed some light on some of these additional partnerships you guys have?
Oh, absolutely. It's a real pleasure. We own 49% of a First Nations mining company. They're called Chiona Metals. Chiona it means wolf in both Tahltan and Kaska language. And we own 49% of them. And one of the projects we're involved with is a project called Salmon Gold, salmon like the fish, Salmon. And what it is, we work with placer miners and sell their gold at a premium to U.S. corporations to guarantee all the gold. And then the premium is then put back into the property. So the creek and the river, the stream and all that is rehabilitated. And then we introduce salmon and other wildlife to the area. No one's allowed to mine it again. And the 2 companies in the U.S. that buy it are Tiffany Company, the big jewelry company, and a little company called Apple. So when we talked about, we made the announcement in 2019 before the pandemic. That was the first year we did it. We had worked with a placer miner in Yukon. And since then, we've now got the rights to Canada, but we haven't done anything with it since the pandemic, but hopefully next summer that kicks in. But we put the news out in, I think it was August of 2019, and a couple of people phoned me up and said, no, Mr. Docherty, is this true? Are you working with Apple, or are you just making stuff up? And as I said earlier to you, Bryce, and to your audience, I told them, don't believe a word I said. Go on the Apple website, /in Salmon Gold, and you'll see the picture of our indigenous partner, Alan Adzurza, overlooking the Yukon River in the Apple brochure themselves. So again, it's not me saying it. And it took about 3.5 months for Apple to give their blessing to allow a junior company into the Salmon Gold. Because as you can imagine, the reputations of some junior companies run by yahoos and weirdos, if you will. So they didn't want anything associated with that. So they checked us out, I think about 3.5 months to find out who we were, what our backgrounds were. And they were okay with it. So they said, okay, yeah, you can be part of the Salmon Gold with them, and away we go. So, you imagine, and we don't really talk about it too much. I think other juniors would be standing on the corner saying, look, we're in partnership, third party with Tiffany and with Apple, but it's like, this is who we are. This is who we hang out with. It gives us instant credibility. So when we say to people, like, Don't believe about the lithium tellurium battery, go check out UBC yourself. Or don't believe me about the CEO of First Solar saying he's going to need between 900 to 1,100 tons a year starting the next year. Interview yourself. So it's much easier for me because we have so many wonderful stories. I don't have to try and add anything to it to make it exciting. If people can't figure out, here we are as a junior company, what we're sitting on and why I'm so confident, why I keep putting my money into it, because I know we're sitting on something great. And I went through this before with Quinto. We had a lot of others and this and that. Our market cap was lower than it should have been, in my opinion. And then it took one financier to say, oh my goodness, you guys are sitting on the real thing. And then, a year and a half, 2 years later, we were sold, as I mentioned, for $175 million, took the paper, ended up being worth $1 billion enterprise. And there was nothing new that was added, but finally people open up because, as you know, Bryce, when something is too good to be true, someone's always looking for what's going on and what's going on. And it's not. That's why I say to people, don't believe a word I said. Don't. Here's the sources, go from there. But if I keep putting my money into something that's fantasy, I must be an idiot. And one thing I know for sure, I may be a plus student, but I'm not an idiot, right?
Gotcha. Yeah, and I strongly believe people put their money where their mouth is, right? And the fact that you hold so many shares of this company, you're continuing to invest in it, and you've got so many credible partnerships, and that's why I wanted the salmon gold one in there. I know we talked about it in my first video as well, and it's definitely a unique aspect of the company. So Ty, I know we've gone through a lot today. It was definitely overdue, as you can see by the amount of content we have. Is there anything we've missed or any final closing thoughts for the viewers watching today?
Yeah, absolutely. I should write this stuff down. I always forget it, but a couple things to go by. I think it's important to know that the Department of Energy in the U.S., they set aside $20 million to help with the advancement of the tellurium as far as solar panels go. And I think 90% of that went to First Solar, which is not unexpected. But a couple months after that, so probably a year and a half ago, the Department of Energy set aside $3 billion for the advancement of better lithium batteries. So as we mentioned, according to the UBC patent, they're far superior to a lithium-ion battery for a number of different reasons. So I don't know if the Department of Energy in the U.S. knows about this lithium tellurium battery yet from UBC. I believe there's going to be inroads made to them in the future. So I'm not going to tell people here that, well, we expect to get money from the Department of Energy. But if, in fact, they've got $3 billion for better batteries, and UBC says, well, we think we got a better battery, I think at worst, they'll take the phone call from UBC for an explanation at the very worst, and we'll see what happens. And then the other thing is that, we have some connections in the Defense Department in the U.S., not huge connections, but little ones. So I remember talking to them and said to them, as a Canadian, I think I know this, but you can clarify for me, doesn't the Department of Defense have more money than the Department of Energy? And he said, absolutely. I said, well, the reason I brought that up is about a year ago, and by the way, Bryce, I always say about a year, I should have a calendar there, but a year ago, 6 months, whatever it is, the Department of Defense put out a white paper, the U.S. Department of Defense, just so clear, white paper on 4 things that they wanted to concentrate on going forward. And number 2 or number 3, and I should have remembered it, but in the top 4 of the things was getting better lithium batteries, stuff that isn't clogging up when they're, in the sands or in the tanks or whatever. So I say to people, if we get a chance to show the Department of Defense that, by the way, that meter of space or 2 meters of space where you've got batteries now that you can get 8 or 10 times or 20 times more lithium tellurium batteries in there that will, instead of going 200K, maybe it goes 1,500K or something because you got that much more power in the same space. I think they'd be interested on behalf of them. So when you have something and people understand what you have and their budgets are, they don't have to worry about it, they want to secure it, then that's another opportunity for us. So we're just sitting there going forward. And again, the beauty of this, just to recap, is that if tellurium went to zero, it really wouldn't affect us that much with the copper and the gold and silver, but it's not going to go to zero. And that's why I think people will knock on the door, because we're the only one in town. Even if we were the only one at 6, I'd be happy, but we're the only tellurium in town, and it's world-class properties.
Yeah, I love this story. You've got so much energy, Tyrone, and having you on and hearing all these different elements of the company all coming together, really refreshing and really solidifies kind of my outlook on the sector and on your company specifically. Thank you so much for the time today. I know we went through a lot of different elements of the company. If people are looking for more information, what's the best way to find it?
Yeah, our website is firsttellurium.com. Tellurium is spelled Tellurium, because not too many people know how to spell it. Firsttellurium.com, and our website's pretty good and informative, and I think they'll see what we're doing, because it's gearing up to be a really special end of 2023 and beginning of 2024.
Yeah, it definitely is. We'll be sure to have you back. We'll get an update out to everyone in a quarter or two. Tyrone, thanks for your time today, and we wish you all the best.
Bryce, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.